Imagine this. You're standing in a cold room, the kind of cold that doesn't just cling to your skin, it sinks deeper, reaching your bones, whispering things you're not ready to hear. In the center of the room stands a man. His hands are shaking, blood stains the creases between his knuckles. Across from him lies a stranger, motionless, eyes still open in a gaze that no longer sees. The man stares at what he's done. His face isn't twisted in rage, nor pride, nor madness. It's twisted in disbelief. He whispers, "I'm not this kind of person." And you believe him, because just 2 years ago, this man was a school teacher, a kind one. He taught literature. He gave his lunch to hungry students. He stayed late for tutoring. He loved dogs, poetry, and his daughter's terrible finger paintings. Now he is something else, something darker, something unrecognizable even to himself. But here's the most terrifying part. He still believes he's a good person. How does this happen? How does someone go from compassion to cruelty, not overnight, but step by silent step? How do we become what we swear we never would? Is it weakness, madness, or is it something much closer to home, something so subtle, so insidious, that it grows in the shadows of your best intentions? You want to believe in good and evil as clean lines. You want to believe that monsters are born, not made. That cruelty wears a mask you can recognize, but history, psychology, and even your own reflection will tell you otherwise. Every tyrant once thought he was justified. Every war criminal believed in something. Every executioner said, "I was just following orders." We tell ourselves those people are different. We say things like, "I would never do that. I could never become that." But what if that's the first lie? What if the real danger isn't the darkness out there, but the silence within? What if the potent, alpha monstrosity doesn't exist in the fringe of humanity, but in its very center, in you? There are moments when people who call themselves kind do unspeakable things, moments where loyalty overrides morality, where survival trumps compassion, where groupthink suffocates conscience, and in those moments, somewhere between fear and justification, a line is crossed, quietly, permanently. But they don't notice, because becoming a monster doesn't feel like an explosion. It feels like a compromise. It feels like just this once, like it's for the greater good, like I had no choice. It's not the roar of evil that transforms the soul, it's the whisper. So here's the question that should make your stomach turn. What if the difference between a good person and a monster isn't who they are, but what they're willing to overlook? What if the slope isn't slippery by accident, but by design? What if your values are only as strong as the pressure not to betray them? If you were placed in the right storm, powerless, afraid, angry, desperate, what might you justify? What might you become? Psychologist Philip Zimbardo once said, "The line between good and evil is permeable, and almost anyone can be induced to cross it when pressured by situational forces." Almost anyone. Let that settle. You've seen it happen, not just in far-off dictatorships or dystopian histories, but in quiet neighborhoods, in families, in friendships, in your workplace, in yourself, if you're honest. A snide comment that becomes a grudge, a small lie that morphs into betrayal, a moment of anger that burns down something beautiful. We rationalize, we deny, we distance ourselves from the damage, but deep down, we know, we feel it, that shift, that shiver, that moment when something sacred is exchanged for something easier. And still we want to ask, why? Why do good people turn into monsters? Is it trauma, culture, biology? Is it some ancient instinct or a modern disease? And more importantly, can it be stopped? Can you stop it in yourself before it's too late? These are not questions for the faint-hearted, but they are the only questions that matter. Because if you don't understand how the light dims, you'll never notice when you're standing in the dark. It begins with something deceptively innocent. A need to belong, a need to be seen as good, a need to be safe. And these needs, though deeply human, are the cracks through which the darkness seeps. You might think that evil is born of hatred or rage, but more often it's born of fear. The fear of exclusion, the fear of uncertainty, the fear of losing control. This is the paradox. The more desperately a person clings to being good, the more blind they become to the parts of themselves that are not. And in that blindness, the monster grows, not as an enemy, but as a shadow. Carl Jung warned us of this. He said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, because to do so is to face the shadow, the part of you capable of cruelty, betrayal, deceit, domination, the part you deny, repress, and exile in the name of morality. But what is denied does not disappear. It festers, it waits, and when the time is right, it slips through the cracks of your righteousness, wearing your values as a mask. This is the hidden danger. The more convinced you are of your virtue, the more dangerous you become." History is littered with atrocities committed by those who thought they were on the right side. Not monsters, not madmen, ordinary people, a bureaucrat sending children to camps, a soldier shooting villagers under orders, a doctor sterilizing the unfit in the name of progress. None of them thought they were evil. Many believed they were heroes. Because evil doesn't always wear a snarl, it often wears a smile. It calls itself duty. It speaks in the language of progress, justice, safety, order. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote of bad faith, the act of lying to oneself to avoid existential responsibility. It's not that people don't know they're doing harm, it's that they construct elaborate stories in which they aren't the villain. They become the soldier just following orders, the citizen who doesn't get involved, the friend who watches the betrayal and says nothing, and they sleep at night, convinced they've done nothing wrong. Because the mind is a master of disguise, it can dress cowardice as caution, it can turn complicity into virtue. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "Whoever fights monsters should see to it that he does not become a monster, and if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you." But what if the abyss is not outside you? What if it is you, disguised, denied, and dangerously unacknowledged? The monster isn't always a separate being. It can be a role you slowly adopt, a face you put on for the world, so often and so convincingly, you forget it's a mask. Arthur Schopenhauer understood the brutal truth of human nature. He believed that much of our so-called morality was simply the restraint of will, not the absence of darkness. That deep within, we are driven by selfish desire, masked only by layers of social etiquette and performance. Strip away comfort, strip away status, strip away the illusion of control, and you will see who you really are, or who you're capable of becoming. This is why so many so-called good people collapse in times of chaos. Because their goodness was circumstantial, not rooted in awareness, but in the absence of pressure. They did not become monsters by accident. They were simply never forced to meet the part of themselves that already lived in shadow. And then, one day, that part was called forth. By fear, by resentment, by power, by the intoxicating clarity of a cause that justified anything done in its name. Aldous Huxley, in Brave New World, imagined a society where suffering had been eliminated, replaced by pleasure, distraction, and comfort. But even in this utopia, the human soul was starved, because meaning had been stripped away. We believe the absence of pain makes us moral, but what if pain is what keeps us human? What if it is only through suffering, through confronting the shadow, that we can become truly good? Because real morality isn't about being nice, it's about knowing what you're capable of and choosing restraint. It's about owning the part of you that could betray, harm, or destroy, and keeping it in check through conscious effort. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Holocaust, wrote, "The last of the human freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." Even in a concentration camp, he argued, a person could choose dignity, compassion, and meaning. But that choice is only possible when you acknowledge you have a choice at all, when you stop pretending the monster isn't there. Because denying your shadow doesn't make you innocent, it just makes you unprepared. And if you are unprepared, then one day, under the right storm, you will not resist the transformation. You will become what you never thought you could be. You will do what you swore you never would. All while telling yourself, you're still a good person. You don't notice it at first. That's how the transformation works. It doesn't come with fangs or flames. It comes with paperwork, with quiet justifications, with slightly colder eyes in the mirror. You convince yourself you're doing what needs to be done. You become efficient, focused, less emotional, You stop asking the kinds of questions that used to keep you up at night. You silence the voice that whispers, "This isn't right." And eventually, it stops whispering back. That's the cost of becoming a monster. Not the carnage you create, but the parts of yourself you lose to maintain the illusion. When good people turn into monsters, the world doesn't always notice. They keep showing up to work, they pay their bills, they smile in photographs. But something in their soul begins to rot, and rot spreads. It spreads through relationships, through communities, through systems designed to reward obedience and punish conscience. Because the moment you compromise your integrity, you begin to expect everyone else to do the same. And if they don't, you resent them, you mock them, you call them naive, idealistic, soft. You drag them down with you, not out of cruelty, but because you can't bear the reminder of what you once were. That's how darkness grows, not through force, but through invitation. It offers you relief, and then it demands you offer the same relief to others. The brain's quiet betrayal, your mind, in its desperate bid for coherence, assists in the self-deception. Cognitive dissonance theory tells us, when your actions clash with your values, you don't always change your behavior. You change your beliefs to match the behavior. You say, "They deserved it. Everyone else is doing it. That's just how the world works." And slowly, your compass spins, not violently, but gradually. Not out of malevolence, but necessity, because to admit the truth would shatter you. A culture of monsters in suits, now multiply that by millions. Think about entire systems run by people who believe they're still good, even as they exploit, surveil, punish, or erase. Think of corporations that poison rivers, then sponsor Earth Day events. Governments that bomb cities, then speak of peace. Religious leaders who preach forgiveness while hiding abuse. They are not always liars. Some truly believe in their mission, because the machinery of rationalization is more powerful than the machinery of justice. Aldous Huxley once warned that the future wouldn't arrive with jackboots, but with sedation. Not a boot on your neck, but a hand on your shoulder saying, "Relax, everything is fine." But what happens when enough people relax their ethics, when enough people trade truth for convenience, when a generation grows up believing that numbness is normal? You get exactly what we see now. A culture obsessed with virtue signaling but allergic to accountability. A public addicted to outrage but paralyzed by inaction. People who scream about evil out there but refuse to confront it in here. Because facing the monster within means risking the collapse of your identity. And for most, that price is too high. The monster in the mirror. You start noticing the symptoms. A friend ghosted because you told the truth. A coworker thrown under the bus to protect a brand. A moment where you watched injustice unfold and said nothing. Each moment is small, forgettable. But like drops of poison, they accumulate. And one day you wake up, and there is no clarity in your reflection, only shadows, only the ghost of a person you once believed you were. You think back to the moments you compromised, each so minor, so necessary, each dressed in good intentions, each leaving a bruise that never fully healed. Because what we bury doesn't disappear. It festers in our habits, in our reactions, in the way we withdraw from others and ourselves. The empathy collapse. When you suppress your guilt long enough, something else happens. Your empathy dulls. Neuroscience shows us that repeated moral disengagement, justifying harm to others, literally rewires the brain. The more you rationalize cruelty, the easier it becomes to repeat. Empathy becomes friction, and friction slows down the machine. So the mind eliminates it. This is why entire societies can normalize horrors, not because people are born evil, but because they are born adaptable, and empathy, in a culture of monsters, becomes a liability, the inheritance of silence. Worse still, this isn't where the damage ends. The monster you become doesn't die with you. It becomes the template others follow. Your children watch you justify injustice. Your colleagues see your silence and replicate it. Your community learns to mirror your numbness. In time, the entire structure is built on rot, and no one remembers how it began. Only that this is how things are. This is how people raise flags over graves, how bureaucrats write policies in ink made of blood, how a smiling generation forgets what it means to feel. And yet, you still think you're good. That's the final trap. You never stopped calling yourself good. You still do kind things. You still donate, still hug your mother, still cry at sad movies. But deep inside, you know something has changed, not on the surface, but in the roots. And the people around you, they feel it too, even if they can't name it. It's in the hollow of your laugh, in the coldness behind your eyes, in the way you talk about the world like it's beyond saving. So why bother trying? You're not a monster in appearance. You're not unkind in obvious ways. But something human has been traded for something efficient, something numb, something quietly devastating. And now the question returns, darker than before. Can you find your way back? Or is the transformation irreversible? You feel it before you see it. A tension in your chest, a restlessness in your thoughts, an ache that doesn't speak in words, but in absence. It's the sound of your soul tapping against the walls of your silence. You've gone too far into the forest, and now the path back is unclear. But still, something in you remembers, dimly, stubbornly, what it felt like to be whole. This is the beginning of rebellion, not a revolution of fists or slogans, but of perception, a revolt not against the world, but against the false self you've been wearing like armor. The first rebellion, admitting the shadow exists. Carl Jung called it shadow work, the terrifying act of confronting the parts of you that you'd rather bury, the cowardice, the envy, the manipulation, the hidden hunger for power. Not to punish yourself, but to finally stop lying. Because the shadow, once integrated, is no longer your enemy. It becomes your ally, your teacher, your warning bell. The people who commit the greatest harm are not the ones who see the evil in themselves, but the ones who refuse to. Your first rebellion is simple, but brutal. Tell the truth about who you've become, without euphemism, without justification. Look your shadow in the eyes and say, I see you, I know what you are, and I will no longer pretend you're not real. The second rebellion. Refusing the comfort of numbness. Comfort is seductive. It tells you to scroll past, to say, it's not my problem, to laugh at suffering because everyone else does, to shut down the ache of empathy before it becomes inconvenient. But numbness is not peace. It is slow decay. Aldous Huxley warned us that the modern world wouldn't collapse from tyranny, but from indifference. The only antidote to numbness is presence. It's the decision to feel again, to grieve what you became, to let the guilt in, not to drown in it, but to let it break you open. You are not meant to be cold. You are not meant to be clever, detached, performative. You are meant to burn with the fullness of human experience. That fire is not weakness. It is your soul trying to come back to life. The third rebellion, saying no to the machine. There is a system. It rewards your silence. It praises your obedience. It monetizes your distraction. You don't have to be a dictator to serve it. You just have to keep your head down. Go with the flow. Stay in your lane. But rebellion begins with refusal. No, I will not normalize cruelty just because it's policy. No, I will not participate in conversations that dehumanize. No, I will not betray my values to protect my comfort. And when you say no, even quietly, you disrupt the script. You remind others that there is another way. You give the frightened ones permission to feel brave again. The fourth rebellion, embracing the pain of becoming. Healing is not peaceful. It is war within your own psyche. Because every lie you've lived will fight to stay alive. Every identity built on self-deception will crumble, and the ego will scream because it fears annihilation. But pain is not your enemy. As Viktor Frankl taught, suffering becomes meaningful the moment we choose our response to it. Let the pain do its work. Let it teach you where you gave yourself away. Let it show you the difference between who you truly are and who the world told you to be. This is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming real. Real people cry, they tremble, they mess up and apologize. They stop performing and start listening. They make space for truth, even when it's ugly. That is what redemption looks like, not perfection, but presence. Historical proof. The ones who refuse to disappear. History is full of those who said no when the cost was everything, like Sophie Scholl, who resisted Nazi propaganda with leaflets and was executed at 21, like Viktor Frankl, who chose meaning over despair inside the camps, like Nelson Mandela, who transformed his rage in prison into wisdom, like whistleblowers, artists, exiles, those who gave up comfort to keep their conscience alive. They weren't saints. They were ordinary people who made a choice. To be human in a world that rewards the inhuman. Their lives were proof. You can descend into darkness and still find the light again. You can fall and still choose to rise with eyes open. The final rebellion. Living as if your soul matters, the world will not tell you this. It will tell you to be productive, to be liked, to be successful, to be useful, but not to be whole. Living soulfully is itself a revolution. It means asking real questions, taking real risks, loving without scripts, speaking when it costs, choosing what is right over what is easy. It means walking away from systems that demand your silence. What so? It means becoming the kind of person who cannot be bought, bribed, or broken by applause. And it means holding yourself accountable when you slip, because you will, but you will rise again, without denial. You do this not for reward, not for image, but because your soul demands it. Because somewhere inside, the part of you that still remembers the light is waiting, not for permission, but for courage. And here's the truth, no one tells you. The monster you became is not your final form. It never was. The moment you stop pretending, the moment you stop numbing, the moment you start choosing truth over comfort, you are already changing, not into a saint, not into a hero, but into something far more powerful, a human being who remembers who they were, before the world taught them to forget. There is a moment, after all the masks have fallen, after the lies have cracked and splintered, when you stand completely still. No armor, no excuses, no narrative to shield you. Just silence. And in that silence, something emerges, not with words, not even with thought, but with presence. A quiet knowing that unsettles everything you once believed. The monster was never separate from you. It wasn't an invader. It wasn't a stranger. It was a part of you you refused to see. That is the final and most terrifying realization. The shadow isn't what makes you inhuman. It's what makes you whole. The true nature of wholeness. We have been taught to chase light, to purify, to ascend, to become better. But in that pursuit, we often cut ourselves in half. We glorify the good parts, kindness, discipline, strength, humility, and exile everything messy, flawed, or dark. We say, I'm not angry, I'm not jealous, I'm not selfish. But you are, and so am I. Because to be human is to contain contradictions, to be capable of creation and destruction, to hold love and rage in the same heart, to want to save the world and sometimes to burn it down. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is the ultimate truth. The goal is not to eliminate the monster. The goal is to look it in the eyes and make peace. Integration, the forgotten path to freedom. When you deny the monster, it grows in secret, but when you face it, truly face it, it loses its grip. You begin to see that your anger has a voice worth hearing, that your jealousy points to forgotten wounds, that your need for power often hides a wound of powerlessness. You stop fighting yourself, and something profound happens. You begin to act with integrity, not because you're good, but because you are aware. You begin to speak with honesty, not to appear moral, but because you've faced what happens when you lie. You begin to love, not as a performance, but as a reclaiming of the parts of you that were once too afraid to feel. This is what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, not pure, not perfect, but whole. You become someone who knows exactly what they're capable of and chooses, again and again, not to become it. Not out of fear, but out of choice. Why monsters multiply in the absence of mirrors. Look at the world around you. People scream about justice, yet avoid self-examination. They demonize others, all while ignoring the rot in their own reflection. They project their darkness outward, onto politics, religion, society, never asking, what in me is contributing to this? When you refuse to see your shadow, it doesn't disappear. It simply finds a new mask. That's how monsters multiply, not through evil intentions, but through millions of people avoiding the mirror. The solution isn't to shame them, it's to reflect truth so deeply and clearly they can't look away. Because one brave person who integrates their shadow can break generations of denial. The soul's key, at return, and here you are, after everything you've lost, after everything you've broken, after everything you've denied, you are still here. You have felt the coldness of your own cruelty. You have seen the damage of your own silence, and still you want to come home to yourself. That wanting is sacred. It means the soul has not died. It was only buried, beneath shame, beneath performance, beneath the fear of what it would cost to live with truth. But now it rises, not as a shout, but as a whisper. You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be real. The final choice. So now, in the quiet space between memory and becoming, you are faced with a choice. Not a dramatic, movie-ending kind of choice, but a small, daily, intimate one. Will you continue pretending? Or will you live in truth? Will you keep denying your shadow? Or will you learn to walk beside it? Will you keep numbing, hiding, performing? Or will you choose the harder path, the one that leads back to your soul? This choice is made not once, but every single day, in the silence before you speak, in the pause before you act, in the sacred moment before you betray yourself or stand firm. No one will clap, no one will know, but you will know. And that knowing is the quiet resurrection of your humanity. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the monster was never your enemy. Maybe it was your mirror. Maybe it appeared not to ruin you, but to wake you, to show you the line you were never supposed to cross, not by force, but by reflection. And maybe now, with your eyes open, you will finally understand. You do not become good by killing the monster. You become whole by loving the part of you that could have become one, and choosing day by day never to let it win. This is not a happy ending, it's something deeper. It's the beginning of a new way of being. One where you are no longer afraid of yourself. One where you stop hiding your shadow and start living with light, not as a performance but as a choice. Because now you know, the monster was you, and so is the one who chooses not to become it.